the joke is always going to be, what is real estate? Location, location, location. Everybody will say those are the rules of real estate, right? I would argue that to go with that is time, time, time. Now, some people might say it should be money or resources or partnership or whatever. The point is that you want to have a long lead time in any pursuit. Again, it goes back to the original statement, which is there are not going to be an infinite number of options to consider.
Welcome to Medical Money Matters, the podcast where you can find experts, answers, and resources so that you can achieve mastery over the financial and business aspects of your practice. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Medical Money Matters. I am joined today by Brad Christiansen, Executive Vice President at Colliers International. Brad is someone I am very privileged to call a friend, as well as a medical real estate broker that I've worked with. We've had shared clients for many, many years, and Brad's experience of more than 25 years spans work with solo practices and small build-outs and small leases of square footage on up to multiple joint ASC projects and large build-outs for multi-specialty groups. So Brad, welcome. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Glad to be here, and thanks for the invitation.
Great to see you. Well, I want to jump right in. As you know, we have an audience that's mostly physicians and clinic administrators and managers. So with your years of experience, and I so appreciate how you have a macro understanding of the market and the way that you work, talk a little bit with the group about, for you, what are the hallmarks of a strong real estate investment strategy for a group?
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate the question. And a lot of this is going to probably be somewhat common sense, someone might say, after hearing. But I definitely always start the dialogue with understanding that anything that you do for real estate, in the commercial arena especially, is looking at it from a business acquisition standpoint. So if you were going to put energy into acquiring or merging a business, you need to think similarly about what that energy might be to basically make a real estate play, especially if you're buying a building. The amount of time, energy, and resources to go into it are pretty significant.
That's a multi-year project, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. We when we talk with people starting new practices, when we talk with them about their facilities, we always say that's going to be the gating item, whether they are purchasing or leasing, and if there's any kind of remodel or construction, that will be many months, and if it's ground up construction, several years, most likely. So. Yeah, and I think the one thing some physicians misunderstand is it isn't house buying. It isn't a transaction where it's going to happen in 30 days, or we're going to go through a couple, scenarios. I used to, kind of claim the phrase, there are no 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranches in my world. Everything is, more of a unicorn, more unique to that specific pursuit. So you have to approach it with that manner. Yeah. No, that's great to think about, because I think many of us have been through the real estate transaction on the residential side, and it's easy to think, think that it's going to look something like that, when in reality, very, very different on the commercial side of the world. So,
correct.
Well, that's a great segue to just ask you for your expertise and think aloud a little bit about what our audience should be focused on when they're thinking about owning their own real estate for their medical practice.
Yeah, the joke is always going to be, what is real estate? Location, location, location. Everybody will say those are the rules of real estate, right? I would argue that to go with that is time, time, time. Now, some people might say it should be money or resources or partnership or whatever. The point is that you want to have a long lead time in any pursuit. Again, it goes back to the original statement, which is there are not going to be an infinite number of options to consider. Comparables become challenging. But in most cases, the construction process, just on a tenant improvement for any kind of medical pursuit, from a current condition that is either what we would call shell or has no build out in place, or is a major retrofit of, an existing building that may not have been used for medical purposes before, is at least 6 to 9 months. So when you start to back out from that construction period to basically the design time frame, the permitting time frame, which is another 90 to 120 days,
A wild card.
on top of the procurement portion, which is going to take at least 60 to 90 days. You've got a negotiation in there that's usually 30 days. It's not uncommon at all for it to take at least a year to, if it's new construction, 2 years to get something accomplished.
Yeah, that's great advice for groups thinking to make a change.
Yep.
Time, and location.
Yeah, both go together.
Yeah. What would you say is the hardest part for physicians in working with real estate and purchases?
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people they're the most loyal clients I have. They're many of the physician groups I work with are friends, and they will all tell you their decision-making tree is complicated. It's usually challenged by, do I make this investment versus another investment? Lack of knowledge, lack of experience obviously leads into that too. I think the trust factor of, this is a good decision, this is a good pursuit. And then ultimately, I usually tell people the most challenging part for most physicians is navigating the indebtedness. And again, I'm going to dummy this down, but you've studied, you've practiced, you graduated. Now you're in a place where you're generating a real income, and the first thing physicians want to do is buy their dream home and their fancy car to go to work every day, and they, to agree, have deserved it, right? And so the hard part is, wake up, I'm 36, 38, 40 years old, and now I want to go buy a building, and Brad's telling me I'm going to go leverage a couple $1 million to do something like that. That's a hard pill to swallow. And I think that, like in most pursuits, the earlier on you can have that conversation, so you can have a plan, you can either start to set equity aside for that pursuit, or you determine there's a partnership venture or some other kind of model that would basically reduce the risk, is something to obviously investigate early on.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and thank you for touching on the lack of business experience. That's the main goal for this podcast, is to start filling in that learning gap. So thank you for helping us do this. Real estate is big, and it can be a big opportunity, or it can also be really scary. And I think for folks who are not familiar with business, and I continue to hear from physician friends and colleagues that we give you no business training in medical school whatsoever. Right. There's zero that's offered. I think in the dental world, for some reason, the dental schools do a little bit better job, but for the most part, the School of Medicine, they don't get any background in any of this, and so we expect graduates come out and, they're all very intelligent, and we expect that they understand all these things about business and real estate transactions and other things that are pretty sophisticated. None of which are rocket science, but all of which are complex. And again,
there's not a book you can read, Jill. I mean, what I usually tell people is the hard part is you want to be able to say, okay, well, go study this and then go execute on that. And unfortunately, every market's different. Every practice group is different. Everybody's financial statement looks different. So that makes it challenging.
Very, very challenging. And I have said frequently, I love for our physician colleagues and clients to have a really solid Rolodex of professionals they can call on when they're doing interesting things. And having someone like Brad, with Brad's years of experience on your team, when your group is looking to do something with real estate, is critical. So what would you suggest that our audience look for if they are looking to transact some real estate, and what would they look for in someone like you? What should they have? No,
great question. Yeah, and I would say that probably is as important as the time and understanding of what it is you're trying to pursue is really aligning yourself with the right advisor. Mm-hmm. I have often encouraged people, if you don't have someone in your marketplace, the people to talk to are going to be your CPA or your attorney. They're likely going to know a real estate advisor who has integrity, has worked in the field, has experience. The second to that would be someone who actually has done plenty of medical transactions. I will tell you, I don't work in the retail real estate realm, as an example. There's a different dynamic, a different skill set that is required there. If you were talking to somebody who is used to transacting industrial space or transacting just general office space, but hasn't done a lot of medical clinic transactions or medical space transactions, there's a significant learning curve. So you're looking for someone who understands that, also has, plenty of vendor relationships with architects, designers, land use specialists, contractors who are known to do both ground up or tenant improvement work for medical purposes. And I would lastly just say then, even as you've gotten to that point and kind of affirm that this is the person you want to work with, have them show you a couple of the recent projects that they've been a part of and have them take you to those projects and have an open conversation. I think the due diligence that could be done on the front end to overcome some of the challenges on the backside of a transaction isn't, done well enough by most people that are hiring somebody in my field. And if they were to do that, they would really overcome a lot of the stumbles or hurdles that they might run into later on in the pursuit. So
absolutely, that's great advice. I frequently say to clients, and as you said, also about their architect, but definitely the real estate broker is not to hire your next door neighbor or your cousin or somebody who's, just because they happen to be in the business. It's the question really needs to be, are they, very experienced in medical? It's a very different real estate transaction. As you were saying earlier, the construction is different. It's far more intense and intensive on a build out for medical space than probably any other industry. Except maybe microchip manufacturers; those might be slightly more intense. But there's there's an awful lot to think about, and it's easy to think, oh, my next door neighbor is a commercial real estate broker. I can talk or her, and it does not always compute or think.
And really, what you're going to find is that somebody says, "Oh yes, I can help you with that," and then literally the next question needs to be, "Well, tell me what that looks like, and tell me the last project you were involved with that would have basically been similar to what you're trying to accomplish." And if they can answer that well, then you're stepping down the road in the right direction. If they don't answer it really well and it's very generic, then you need to be careful.
I might want to ask some more questions, or ask for a different referral. And this is a place where sometimes, as making business decisions, we can get caught being nice or being kind. And this is a good time to say thank you so much. We need to chat with a few more people, or my partners are asking for us to interview a few brokers before we hire one.
Right. No, absolutely.
Great advice. How about some pitfalls that our audience could be aware of?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is that, again, most physicians, when they're in this pursuit, basically take what they've learned about residential real estate or even residential real estate investment, and they choose to apply it to, the pursuit on the commercial front. And so the obvious is that they see a building, they like the building, and they say, let's go do that. And I've seen over and over and over where a transaction occurred, there wasn't a team that was involved on the front end in the due diligence, and the cost overruns, the unknowns around, what the permit and SDC costs for new construction or a build out in a new space end up being erroneous. And, arguably the physician spent 30% more, 40% more basically to set up their practice or make that transition than they should have. And that's the pain point. And then the difficulty is now I've got to either go find more money, meaning, go borrow from my retirement account, or, take a second mortgage on the house, or, again, finding partners or trying to figure it out from that standpoint. So I think that the challenge is that you get so honed in on a solution before you've actually, tested it fully. The other is that even if you've found and you've gone through the exhaustive process of, site selection, which is identifying the best scenario, I usually tell people if it's in a lease pursuit, narrow it down to two. If you can have two sites that you can leverage back and forth on, it'll do two things. One, it'll help you audit, is this the market? Is this valuation that's being dictated on a lease rate basis the actual market price? By having at least two options, you're going to be able to compare apples to apples as best you can between those two. The second is that in the world of medical space and specifically the incentives, it's the tenant improvement allowance. So a lot of times a landlord is going to inject capital into that build out, and the variance of what those can be in a retail space is zero up to, I just finished a transaction and the landlord's contributing $175 a square foot to the build out. And I've had people look at me and go, how did you do that? And I would tell everybody it's a numbers game. There are cases where it makes more sense for the tenant to pay for those improvements, and it's cases where it makes more sense for the landlord to pay for those improvements. And that's all part of the exercise on the front end before a lease is signed, before the contract is signed. Yep. The final and maybe I would say as critical, but often isn't recognized, is the need to actually get a budget complete, even if it's just in a concept format. But what is it going to cost to go from where you are today, looking at the facility, to being up and operational? And then I would always tell people, depending on how detailed work that you're looking at is done, meaning do I actually have schematics, or is this just I need 10 exam rooms and we're just kind of, a ROM basically, you want to apply a contingency to it. So if it's a true ROM, I would say I would use in this day and age a 15 to 20% contingency. If we've actually got schematics and notes and a fairly detailed layout of the space to be completed, then maybe it's a 7 to 10% contingency. But you want to have that in mind as you're going out to do your financing, or if you're even looking to fund it yourself, so that you're not caught with surprises down the road.
Yes, we usually advise our clients to do 20 to 25% contingency, even if they do have pretty detailed plans, just given what we've seen lately with the market and prices fluctuating so much. And the length of time it takes, it's a little hard to call if you're doing ground up construction, for instance. And even with tenant improvements, it can take a while to source the materials, and the cost fluctuation are pretty incredible. I'd rather people be over prepared and perhaps have a little bit more financing set aside than they're going to need. But you and I work with some groups here in the Portland market, and I would urge our listeners to find similar groups in their markets who do a phenomenal job of really getting down the detail and really working through the budget prior to any purchase or any lease being signed. And there are organizations out there that will do that will help you engineer out a lot of the surprises.
And pending the size of your organization, it's not a bad thing to hire a third-party project manager who will help with some of that due diligence. I tend to tell people, pending the size of the project, there are areas that project manager can support and is worth the investment.
Yes.
But again, you're looking for people who have specialized in that space, who have actually done that kind of work before.
Exactly. And you can occasionally find those inside of consulting firms like ours. You can find them inside of construction firms, and also inside of architectural firms, and real estate as well. So that's a great point to think about. If you're embarking on a multi-million-dollar project, spending $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 up front on someone that can help you manage it can actually save thousands and thousands of dollars.
Quite a bit.
So great point. So what should groups be looking for if they're ready to jump in, to purchase new space? What are the must-haves versus the nice-to-haves, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think that's a loaded question. I say it from that standpoint because personalities, I know, personalities are going to drive the decision. I'm to some degree a pickup truck and a pizza guy. And some people would say, do I care about having granite countertops and, $10,000 lighting systems, illuminating the space? It's not as important to me, but to some practices that's important. I would argue that the ability to do some imagery on the front end of any pursuit. So the wonderful thing about, going online and saying, modern dental clinic, and then all of a sudden hitting the image, link and saying, wow, look at that, look at that. I think whatever the team is, broker, designer, architect, contractor and otherwise, the more that you can kind of say, this is the flavor of what we want to accomplish on the front end, the better you're going to be able to hit what you want to do. And I think that a lot of times there's kind of a misconception, which is, well, isn't Brad supposed to tell me how I'm supposed to do this? Well, I can't get inside your head and tell you exactly what kind of finish level you want. And I have found that more and more, what someone tells me, kind of the, buyers are liars kind of attitude, what someone tells me they want and what they actually want are two different things. And imagery can really, really help kind of overcome that miss on the front end. So spending a couple hours on Google and printing out 10 pictures, and this is kind of what I want to accomplish is actually pretty fruitful in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been through that exercise a few times in my career.
Yeah.
I can also say that as much as I feel like over the years I've been involved in enough clinic construction projects that I feel like I'm somewhat good at that game and somewhat good at reading a floor plan and looking at it.
Yeah.
I could walk into every clinic that I've been involved in designing over the last 30 years and tell you which wall I would move,
Right,
So,
right, exactly.
That room really was too small. Yes. And I would interject here, when we're building exam rooms, we used to build them standard 8x10, and I now think that's far too small for what you need to do in an exam room, especially if anybody's coming in with the patient or if you're going to have a scribe in there. It gets very tight very quickly.
The one thing I would add is that, again, left brain, right brain in terms of how some physicians work, because there are artistic physicians would be my way to say it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's their practice and that's how they build. To always understand that the efficiencies of working in a rectangle or a square are beyond significant from what you would do with any other commercial real estate pursuit. So some physicians like that they've got, different kind of architectural fronts or, pop outs or, some kind of lighting system or relight, meaning exterior natural light coming in that looks really, really cool from the exterior of the building. But from a practical standpoint, in terms of how it actually serves inside, it just doesn't make sense to put glass floor to ceiling when it's going into an exam room. I mean, that's just kind of a baseline. But if that's what you choose to do, you're going to spend a lot of money for it. You're not necessarily getting a benefit for it.
And you'll wind up frosting the glass because you need
That's the point. That's the point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Might be a little cold in the winter too.
Yeah, exactly. It's really hard to regulate temperature in walls where one room is all glass.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and I'm a fan here, having lived through a lot of construction projects and being north of the 45th parallel. I'm a fan of bringing as much natural light into a space as we can with relights and skylights, and also keeping in mind, you need the patient confidentiality. So
it's
nice to have the public spaces around, where all the glass is, and then have the exam rooms interior, but keep some light in them so they don't become caves.
That's true. Absolutely.
You and I can have a whole other podcast just about floor plans and things.
Oh, I know. Yeah, or the things that we've seen go wrong. I probably have some
that would be probably a more
so.
interesting podcast. Is what not to do when you're building a space. Well, let's talk about medical condos for a minute, because I know those are more and more popular, and we're seeing those in more places. And sort of how they work, and what would you say are the benefits and what are the risks?
Yeah, I mean, in certain markets where, again, the acquisition costs just for the buildings have gotten so high, and we would usually say, somewhere north of $500 a foot, it starts to become a little bit more challenging for somebody to think about, gosh, I have to spend that to acquire the building, and now I've got to spend another $200 a foot to build it out. And and the total cost in. So I tend to tell people there's kind of, three angles that you're looking at when you're buying the real estate. The number one is you need it for 10 years. Whatever you're going to do, don't think you're going to position it for 5 years in a flip or some other kind of change. There's too much investment going in it. it needs to be at least a decade for you to start to actually see the principal pay down and the appreciation. So just from a basic knowledge of just real estate investing in the commercial space, I'd say every pursuit should be at least for 10 years. If you win after 5, great. But the goal should be to be in it for 10 years. The second would be that I think, when I watched, some of the real failures, it's that they really think going into it that they can get it done in a short amount of time, and then there's exhaustive time frames with the municipalities. You run into some real challenges getting the permitting done, and I tend to tell people that if you are running a practice and you've got a short time frame on your current lease that you're in and you're trying to make a transition, you really, again, want to, I would rather you have 6 months that you're paying rent where you're at as you're transitioning to the new facility than to all of a sudden be paying an enhanced rent to just stay in the space you're in while you're getting to the new facility. Some of it is just the context of the stress that gets created out of that situation too.
Yeah.
So, but I, arguably, most of the people that we've seen that have really been highly successful with, commercial real estate investment for medical purposes, they look at it as the appreciation is the icing on the cake.
Yep.
I'm going to be paying to be operating someplace to do whatever I'm doing in my practice. I tend to tell people the threshold of what I'd call real winning, meaning long-term success, is somewhere between 15 and 20 years, meaning that they've been able to pay down the principal such that at some point you might even just write the note off and you own the building free and clear. Mm-hmm. I've also seen people be able to use that real estate as an expansion opportunity. So they're restructuring that debt every 7 to 10 years, and that allows them to go and invest in another facility or build another facility. But I think that the crux of it is that every physician that I've seen or physician group that I've seen that's owned the building had control of it for a period of time, and then either chooses to sell it as a sale leaseback scenario or sell it as a owner user opportunity to the next group, has done very well, handsomely well after at least 10 years, but generally 15 to 20 is the sweet spot.
Yeah. And fantastic advice. I've seen physicians successfully use it as, college saving funds as well as retirement investment strategies. Again, when you're at a minimum 10-year time horizon, 15 or 20, now we're talking about physicians who are a few years out of residency, as you said earlier, buy the big house, buy the fancy car, celebrate that you've finished all this education, and then, give yourself 4 or 5 years, settle into that, and then start looking for the real estate investment opportunities, especially if you have a practice that lends itself to working through an ambulatory surgery center. Those can also be incredible investments. So, and I probably should have opened the podcast by saying what I frequently say to clients, which is I am favorably predisposed to physicians owning their own real estate. I believe it's a wonderful diversification strategy for their investments, and a great way, like we've said, to build wealth and maybe fund some college educations for their kids or retirements or whatever else they might want to do going forward. But
I want to bounce back real quick to your comment too about the condos. Condos can be a good investment. They generally don't tend to appreciate at the same pace that a single standing project would. Liquidity of a condominium isn't quite as high as liquidity of a standalone. And part of that is that the assumptive is in the condominium structure is that either everybody else in the project is also a medical user, or there could be other, non-similar users. And so how marketable that project becomes is a little bit, challenging, meaning for me to forecast 10, 15, 20 years down the road, right? Whereas the single standing building operator, that building could be converted to an office space. It, potentially if it's located with frontage, could become a retail type space. So you're creating more infinite solutions for the future of that ownership if it's a standalone.
Yeah.
The flip side of it is that, if you're choosing in the order of, do I lease, do I own a condo, or do I own if I can't afford to get into the standalone side, I still would argue that, a condominium interest as a hold for a 10 to 20 year period is going to be a very, very strong investment still.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and you and I have seen some that are condos that are all medical use in the building, and you've
Yep.
seen some that are mixed use. And your
Yep.
point is well made about the liquidity on them maybe being a little bit less. But yeah, still, I would argue, all of the things being equal, but I would say the same as you, which is the medical condo is better than leasing in the long run, just for,
Correct.
you're building equity, and that's,
Yes.
there's something to be said for that. So let's segue a little bit and talk about, there are these organizations out there that help to broker financing and broker loans
Yes.
for the real estate. Tell me what you think about those and how they work.
Yeah, I would say there's really three different ways that you can finance a pursuit. The simple one would be that the seller carries financing. That still happens more in the commercial realm than it does in the residential realm. And we see that not be too unusual. I would argue that a lot of times it's connected to the practice. So somebody wants to come in and there's a succession of the practice, and then they obviously want to buy the real estate, and they're, on a term. Again, conventional in those areas would be somebody buying the real estate on a 20 to 25 year amortization, 10-year term, and maybe that term's renewable pending what the seller position, his goals might be. With respect to, more conventional, third party lending, I would say there's really two models. Either a broker that is, handling multiple types of lending relationships and actually is seeking to provide the best financing for you. And that would be an example, and not to do a shout out, but I've done a lot of work with CMAC in this market, and they've done an excellent job of supporting our physicians in that regard. If you're going to choose a broker, again, I can't say it enough, you need to have someone who understands medical office buildings, understands financing medical space, because they are different animals. They're very different than traditional office or, hospitality or industrial for that matter. Definitely, usually it's owner user financing.
Yep.
And I would say the third bucket most often is community lending. The most you're going to find local banks have relationships, seek physicians as clients. They like that balance sheet. They like that conservative approach to doing business. And they will generally put together a mix of two loan structures to allow for a purchase of a building. The first is just the real estate purchase itself. What's the building cost? What's the down payment? Normal would be, for a conventional loan, somewhere between 15 and 20% as the down payment. You can do an SBA loan, which would be supported by, a government bond sale solution, and you can go up to 90% loan to value. I often discourage that only from the standpoint that there are other strings that are tied to the SBA. So you're paying double the fees on the front end. You're often having to sign that personally. You can have a carve out for your retirement and your, personal home, but you are tied to that note regardless of what you're doing, and how the practice performs. And then the second loan structure that is often piggybacked with that is called a practice loan. The practice loan is everything from the tenant improvements to the equipment, potentially some operating capital to get up and running. Practice loans are not bad loans. I'm actually a big supporter of practice loans. Mostly, again, if you've got somebody like Jill I'll do a shout out for her too in this, but someone that's going to help you through your financial projections. The good news of practice loans is, yes, generally they're 10 years, 10-year amortization. They're paid off sooner than that time frame because you start to accelerate your practice or your growth or what that might look like. And then you end up with just the real estate loan. So you've gotten rid of that, higher debt cost. I wouldn't call it a rolling credit, but it does allow for the fixed cost associated with the real estate to be separate from basically the practice and the tenant improvement loan structure. And so arguably at the point in time that you pay off that practice loan, your cash flow starts to be far more significant and allows you to then make other investments or to do an expansion or to do a remodel or what have you. Yep. So there is a real value to having those two loans be separate as you're pursuing a purchase.
Absolutely. And you touched on another good point. You and I are going to begin to sound like broken records, or I don't know what the modern version of broken record is, but that as you're looking for a banker, as well as an architect and a broker, find bankers who are familiar
who know
with
medical space
as well.
Yes.
Especially if they're looking into your finances and potentially looking at historicals. For them to understand, most of the medical bankers I know are getting themselves educated on the cash flow of an average medical practice and how long it does take to collect some of the revenues and what some of the vagaries are of the whole reimbursement side of the world in healthcare, which is the wonkiest system we could imagine. I don't think we could create something this wonky if we set out to do
more complicated.
Yeah. So, but that's a big piece too, is having a banker that understands your world as well. And again, using your next door neighbor because they're an EVP at your local bank, if they're not specialized in medical, they might be a great next door neighbor and they might have nice barbecues, but they're not going to be able to serve you as well as someone who's really steeped in the business. So wonderful. Well, here's the potpourri question. What other thoughts do you have? For our physician
the miscellaneous.
Audience? Yeah, miscellaneous. What haven't we talked about that we should talk about?
Yeah, there's a couple things. I mean, one would be that you will have a situation where we're going through a market cycle. And I've observed, like any other historic dynamic of investment, there are times when real estate goes down, doesn't always go up. So understand that you need to pick the moment that is the right moment for a disposition, not like any other investment. And just because I'm retiring and I said at 63 I was going to retire and all of a sudden it's, the financial crisis of 2009, the wisdom might be, you know what? Let's be open to a couple different ideas. Maybe I should lease the building for a few years. Maybe it makes more sense to lease the building than it is to sell the building. How critical is it that you get that, equity out of the building at that time would be the question to ask. The other is that I do tell people that if you're going to go down this path, it really is a partnership. If you've got a spouse, it's a partnership if you've got other physicians that are working with you. I can say that I've seen it be one of the greatest retainment tools for a physician practice that's a group. And there are ways to set up a buy-in or shared participation that allows for continued opportunities for future physicians to participate.
Yes.
And I've yet to have seen a situation where the physicians didn't benefit from the real estate ownership, especially if there was ongoing succession and that was done correctly.
Yeah.
So I think to look at it as it is a business. I mean, I really, I've always said, someone is still going to have to be managing the day-to-day, paying the utilities, dealing with the vendors to deal with repairs and maintenance. Hopefully that's not the physician owner. Hopefully that's your administrator or, director of operations. And again, I will go back to kind of my first statement, which is if you are interested in owning, the more time and energy you can put into the front end. We talked a little bit about the financing. I would spend a lot of energy really creating, this is basically the, budget that I'm willing to work with. If I can make it work within this budget, then great, let's do this. If I can't make it work within that budget, you're sacrificing something. Either you're going to have to see more patients to be able to support the cost structure. I have a lot of people, as you know, right now, Jill, that are questioning, gosh, interest rates are 6%. Is this a good time to buy? Well, it again, all depends on the person's balance sheet. We're doing as much transactional volume right now as we ever have, even with interest rates having doubled over the last couple of years. So I think it's really a function of, but does it align with your long-term goals in terms of what you're trying to do with your practice? I can't think of other aspects that we've missed in this conversation today. Patience, give yourself a little grace in the process.
Yep.
It's okay to, be down the path on something and then get cold feet and say, you know what, I don't think now is the right time to do it. But really, really be willing to put the energy in on the front end. That's the one miss that most physicians make.
That's great advice, and everyone's busy, and it is almost look at this as briefly as a part-time job.
Yes,
You're doing it well. That you're going to put in the time and energy to at least do the research to find the right advisors, as we've been saying throughout. Because those folks, and even if you're spending a little bit more to have the right advisors on board, that can save you thousands and thousands of dollars down the road.
Correct.
So,
and a lot of times, most people have a hard time seeing really beyond 5 years, let alone 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in a project right now where, the site next door to where the physician owns came up for sale. And, the argument is, do you buy this or not? Because it would extend them from a debt standpoint. There's a tenant PT clinic in place that can pay the rent. But what I've asked the physician is, what is your long-term growth plans? Because if your long-term growth requires more space, I can assure you buying something in place versus having to move and build the practice someplace else has much higher risk associated with it. So understand too that once you own the real estate, it's an asset. It creates opportunity for leveraging, future, potential pursuits, whatever that might look like.
It really does. And to your point, getting clear about the level of risk that they're willing to take.
Yes.
And and that includes, adding investment partners too. A lot of groups like to do it with just the physicians in their group. And to your point earlier, that's a bit like getting married. I mean, you're setting up a different, a separate LLC from your current practice, which is best practice, not to have those two intertwined, but a separate investment group, and a little bit of thought and care going into that for, allowing people to continue on as owners of the business even after they retire from the practice, so that those are two separate entities, but that you have some triggering events in there so that those retired partners have less of a voting interest than the people that are still actively living in the facility and working in it day by day. And so you keep kind of incentives aligned to keep the asset operational.
And you bring up a good point, Jill, which is a lot of people will say, well, I'm the physician, it's my building, and do I really need to write a lease with myself to, control basically the rent, for the site? And we would say, from a tax perspective, absolutely, because that's where you can really maximize the tax benefits of ownership. Yeah. And that's, again, a whole nother conversation, as you know. But the secondary piece is because, again, you don't know what that practice might look like. You might enlist a partner as a physician in the practice. I would always want the real estate to be a standalone, separate LLC with a separate ownership structure. There's no doubt about that.
That is key. And that is something I typically find with clients, even those who are already bought in, they don't quite understand the why of those being two separate entities. And but I think good take-home messages for us today, as I've heard, are time. Give yourself lots of time and space and patience, and also think ahead and plan for a 15 or 20 year time horizon. Even if you might retire in 15 years, you might hold real estate longer than that. So it's wonderful. And then find advisors who specialize in medical, and insist on that. I would say that's going to make your practice.
Get those resumes, get those case studies, make sure that you've seen the few projects that they've done. That's an important thing.
Fabulous advice. Well, Brad, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Jill.
Lending your expertise. It's been a great conversation.
Absolutely.
And we'll have you back. We'll do another one of these sub podcasts that we've already
That sounds good. Yeah.
Right.
Look forward to it.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
You can find more information online at medicalmoneymatterspodcast.com, and you can sign up to be notified when the contracting visualizer tool is ready for purchase. We've included those links in the show notes. As I like to close out these podcasts, congratulations on taking the next step in your professional development and for making the commitment to learn about the financial and business aspects of your practice. I look forward to being on this journey with you and send you my heartfelt gratitude for all that you do for your patients all day, every day.